The SD70 family was very successful for EMD and allowed it to keep in close competition with General Electric. However, with the looming EPA Tier 2 emission standards taking effect in 2005, a new locomotive had to be produced. EMD's answer was the SD70ACe, SD for standard duty, 70 for the 70 series family, AC for the AC traction motor, and E for eco-friendly. The majority of the Class 1 railroads would purchase the locomotive, with BNSF and UP having the largest fleets, both with over 600 units. EMD would go on to sell to smaller Class 2 railroads as well as foreign railroads. The ACE was sold until 2015, when more stringent EPA regulations, the same thing that created the SD70 ACE, would eventually go on to cause its downfall. The original SD70ACe Genesis model was actually mold built by Tower 55, a plastic division of the brass manufacturer Overland Models. Before they could be brought to market, the molds were purchased by Athearn Genesis in 2008, and Genesis debuted the SD70ACe in 2010. Since then, the ACE has been re-released in many road names and hundreds of road numbers, featuring heritage and memorial units as well. For this release, Athearn is bringing back updated versions of the 3 of the UP heritage units, as well as BNSF, Montana Rail Link, and Tacoma Rail. There's a total of 7 paint schemes and 12 road numbers. These versions are updated with the Genesis 2.0 details as well as Tsunami 2 sounds. The model that we will be taking a look at today is UP 1983, one of the UP heritage units decorated to honor the fallen flag Western Pacific Railroad. Starting the detail analysis as usual with the upper half of the front of the locomotive, the top of the brow of the locomotive is packed full of details. The middle of the brow is the high-mounted LED headlights in the warm white color. On either side of these is another lighting feature, the backlit number boards. The railroad name UP is printed on the outer sides of these number boards with a separately applied grab iron on the locomotive brow as well. Just under these is the large square windows that the SD70ACe inherited from the SD90 family series. These windows are non-tinted and have etched metal windshield wipers installed on them as well. Moving down towards the nose, some of the details that are installed are the sandfill hatches on either side of the notch section and the drop-style grab irons on different parts of the nose. On the front of the nose, the center locking access door is attached just to the engineer's side of the nose. The other side of the nose has the grab iron ladder installed with the separately applied wire components. The front features some really good paintwork with the orange tiger striping on the nose and the white Western Pacific lettering added as well. The last component to mention is the front handrails, with all molded in one plastic piece but has some white accent painting running down to the side steps. Underneath the handrails is the last lighting feature on the front of the locomotive, the pilot-mounted LED ditch lights. Matching the rest of the LED features, the ditch lights are in the warm white color. One of the more difficult to see details on the front is the MU cable receptacles that are tucked up under the anti-climber. Depending on the unit, these cable covers are painted in different colors. For the WP unit, the MU cables are painted in red and green. Just below that is the coupler cut bar that is separately applied plastic piece with the white accent painting on the handle portions. The locomotive air lines are applied to the front sill and laid down through a hole in the snowplow. These flexible air hoses are painted black and have silver accent painting on the glad hands. The snowplow is also mounted to the front sill, painted in the WP green, matching the rest of the front details. The coupler is a scale McHenry plastic coupler with the scale draft box. The coupler features molded on details as well as a magnetic trip pin. The last detail is the train line air hoses. Matching the locomotive air hoses, it's plastic painted in black and accent painting silver on the tip for the glad hands. On the fireman's side of the cab, the sunshades are the first separately applied metal piece that we see. The ones on the WP unit are the smaller angled ones compared to the large or rectangular style ones seen on the SD70M Tac 2. The windows are tinted in a nice mild tint for a bit of a change from the earlier releases of the UP heritage units. The windows do feature silver detail painting along the edge trim pieces, and separately applied wind deflectors or side mirrors can also be seen after the first window. Moving towards the front side steps, the separately applied plastic handrail can be seen right along the etched metal side steps. This is one of the major upgrades in the Genesis 2.0 line. The etched metal steps are see-through and feature the white accent painting for employee visibility. The WP unit is a 5-step variant compared to the BNSF and Montana Rail Link that feature 6 steps on the front steps. The second step from the ground features a light housing underneath it and is a non-operational light component. While down there, it is a good opportunity to check out the truck details. These are the EMD HTCR4 trucks and have really good molded on details with the struts and other various roller bearing components, as well as separately applied details like the brake piston and the wire brake plumbing running between the two pistons. Other details that are added onto the trucks are the sanding lines that can be seen. One of my favorite details on any locomotive is the fuel tank, and this Genesis 2.0 SD70ACe is no exception. The first of these details is the breather pipe that runs out of the fuel tank and drops below just in front of the front truck, so any excess fuel is dripped onto the rails. Other smaller fuel tank details are the fuel filler port and fuel level sight glass. Moving up towards the top of the body, the side of the SD70ACe is littered with details across the long hood. One of the biggest components on this newly rebuilt locomotive is the change in the inverter cabinet found just behind the fireman's cab side. About half of the intake grills are molded on details, but the ones immediately behind the cab are the inverter intake grills, and these are etched metal components painted in the Western Pacific green. Getting on top of the inverter cabinet is a drop-style grab iron ladder that is separately applied. The handrails are molded onto the plastic stanchions and are made from a silicone plastic material that gives good reliability while staying flexible enough to be handled. Towards the back of the locomotive are more of the see-through intake grills, like the grill just below the radiator section and the intake grill for the dynamic brake blower. The dynamic brake blower assembly can actually be seen behind the grill. The back of the locomotive has a lot of the features you've come to expect from the Genesis 2.0 line. The first separately applied detail is the rear horn bracket. You may notice it doesn't actually have a rear horn, and this was a design choice from the EMD factory. The original design would call for 2 horns to meet the FRA compliance for locomotive horn sound requirements, but horn manufacturer Athearn would develop the new 5-chime K5LLA horn, satisfy the requirements without the need of a second horn. Just below this bracket is the rear-mounted LED light, once again in the warm white color, and on either side is the locomotive number. The left side of the rear of the locomotive has a separately applied grab iron ladder leading up to the top of the locomotive. Other grab irons are also installed on the rear on either side, but are slightly different in style and a little bit larger than the drop-style grab iron ladder. Another set of intake grills for the dynamic brake blower can also be seen just below the rear light. Moving down below the sill is more of the standard features. Details like the coupler cut bar, MU cable receptacles, and trainline air hoses are all separately applied plastic components that are added to the rear sill. These details all have the applicable accent painting similar to what was found on the front of the locomotive. One of the newer upgrades from this Genesis 2.0 line is the addition of the rear knuckles that are mounted to the rear sill that are painted in the rusty brown color and have the designation F and E for the different knuckle types. The rear is finished off with the McHenry plastic scale coupler and the trainline air hose. Both of these features are similar to the ones found on the front. The engineer's side of the long hood is pretty similar to the conductor's side. There are a few minor differences, mostly with the braking system and the fueling system. Starting with the brake wheel, this separately applied detail is located just above the rear truck. This is also a good opportunity to take a look at the lift rings that are etched metal components added to the radiator fan section. Underneath the sill is an array of separately applied components. The first one to take a look at is the air dryer system. The 2 biggest components of the air system are the air receiver tanks located just above the fuel tank. One of my favorite details is the air plumbing running between the 2 tanks and running up under the sill. I really like the little ball valve as it's molded into the separately applied plastic components of the air system plumbing. In between the 2 receiver tanks is an array of fuel tank details. We have the fuel filler port, fuel level sight glass, and the emergency cutoff switch. Just in front of the larger air tank receiver is 2 of the final air filter air details. The mechanical bell detail is located just in front of the air filters and right above the 3rd axle on the front truck and is a separately applied metal piece. Up on top of the sill, another good detail to see is more of the see-through etched metal steps like we saw on the 4 corners for the side steps. One of the main reasons to actually upgrade from the older releases to this new Genesis line is the addition of the PTC antenna array located on top of the cab, similar to other SD-style Athearn Genesis locomotives. The cab roof is removed by slowly inserting a small tool at the rear of the cab and popping it open. With the cab roof removed, the interior can easily be accessed to install cab figures or to continue detailing this already detailed cab. You can spy the differences from the older Genesis line by comparing this cab interior to the older Mopac unit I have. One of the most notable differences is the addition of the LED light board and how the backlit number boards now operate. When installing the cab roof back into position, it's important to note the angled notch at the front of the cab roof has to be touched up into its slot or else it won't properly seat back into position. Down the entire length of the long hood, all of the crew access walkways are treaded just like the prototype. Back on top of the roof, there are two exhaust louvers. The first one of these is for the generator and other electrical equipment blowers, and the larger one is just for the prime mover exhaust. The horn is located on the narrower section of the long hood and is the Nathan K5LLA horn, a separately applied component using the brass in a lost wax casting. One of the most useful spotting features for the SD70ACe is the rear radiator section and the use of the two 52-inch exhaust fans. The fan grills are made from plastic but have an inner fan blade details to really give some good depth into the radiator fan bank. Another added on detail is the pair of electrical conduits running to each fan. Just behind the radiator bank is the dynamic brake fan blower and is made from etched metal and does not have an inner fan to give some depth as the radiators do. The shell of the locomotive can be removed by removing the 4 screws underneath the locomotive, 2 that hold in the coupler boxes, and 2 are located on either side of the fuel tank underneath the rear truck stabilizer arms. The shell can be gently pried away from the chassis, and if you've ever owned an older SD70ACe, you would know that a bird's nest of wires would then fly out at you. But with this new Athearn Genesis 2.0 line, they have added 2 PCB contact boards to help wire management and to allow the chassis to be completely removable from the body. Comparing this chassis to the older ACE runs, we notice some differences right away with the use of different die-cast metal blocks to help give some weight to this newer run. The same Genesis 5-pole skew-wound motor is utilized in both chassis as well as a multi-link traveling drivetrain to provide power back to the rails. All the wheels do pick up power as well as provide tractive force. A combination of the Tsunami 2 decoder as well as the dual Sugar Cube speaker really help provide a good bassy sound of this EMD 710 engine. Now that we've had a good chance to take a look on the inside and the outside of this model, we will go ahead and give some track power to check out the rest of the features on the Tsunami 2 decoder. This brand new chassis weighed in at 19.02 ounces or 539 grams. Quite the upgrade from the older SD70ACe runs that weighed in at less than 17 ounces or 476 grams. This is where the modified chassis really comes into play. The additional die-cast weights really help give the extra heft to this brand new locomotive and should translate to more cars that this locomotive is able to pull. The pull test was conducted for 3 trials, and then the average was taken from these. It was found that 4.83 ounces, or about 137 grams of pulling power. Owners should expect a single SD70ACe to pull approximately 50 standard freight cars. The coupler heights were measured comparing to the Katy height gauge. It was found that the front coupler was right on the money, and while the rear coupler does look a little low, this is due to the broken knuckle on the McHenry plastic scale coupler, but the shank and the body of the coupler are actually at the correct height. Moving on to the scoring section, the different scoring categories are shown with their respective point values. The model will be scored off these categories and then given a final score and a subsequent letter grade. The packaging is the standard blue box Genesis packaging with the generic Tsunami 2 diesel manual, and the exploded parts diagram for the model and other SD70 variants are found in the box. The accuracy on the model seems to be fairly well done. There's been a few major updates to UP 1983 over the years. The first of these is on October 2013, when the cab roof got upgraded to PTC. The next major one is when it got repainted and an inverter change in November 2014, and finally it got a repaint in early 2017. Looking at all the photos, it appears that there weren't any major cosmetic changes between the 2014 and 2017 repaint, and the most limiting factor on this model is the inverter change. Other than that limitation, it doesn't seem like there's any major changes wise, and this model is fairly accurate to the prototype. The paint on the model is actually very well done, and I had to look over it 3 or 4 times to make sure I hadn't missed any blemishes or issues. All the small printing was very finely done, and all the paint lines didn't have any blurriness or fuzziness to them, and overall I was actually very impressed with this paint job. The details on the model are fairly well done and overall very similar to the older Aces. There are a few minor detail upgrades. One of the most notable of these is the addition of the etched metal side steps, as well as the smaller prototype changes like the inverter cabinet. There's a large number of separately applied details, lots of metal and wire grab iron details, and the plastic details look great too. It is a little disappointing the model does not come with the rotating roller bearing caps, as that seems to be one of the trademark features I've seen on the Genesis 2.0 locomotives. Other features that I thought that could have been better done is that there's no MU cable, which I thought was a little weird, as it does seem that the older SD70s did come with this, and I'm not quite sure why the UP Heritage units do not include one, unlike the BNSF and Montana Rail Link units. No grab irons on the snowplow is another easy one, especially since this feature is found on other Genesis line locomotives. On the SD70 M2s, there's a cable bundle that runs on the underside of the locomotive, and I think this would be a good addition, especially since there's already the drilling holes for installing the cable bundles, which can be pretty clearly seen when I'm looking at the side on the locomotive, and it just looks a little silly. I do not have any good prototype photos of the UP Heritage locomotives on the underside to see if there is supposed to be a cable bundle there or not, but I'm sure there's supposed to be some sort of cables or conduits there, but I just don't have a photo. Finally, one of the bigger things on the Genesis 2.0 line is the fact that it comes with more lighting features, and the ground lights are there, but the side step lightings are not, and even though they do include the housing, the actual lights are not there. Overall, I took away 2 points for the missing rotating roller bearing caps and 5 points for all the little issues I had just mentioned, for a total of 7 points. I really did enjoy the Athearn rework of the chassis internals to include more die-cast metal chassis weights, and now the locomotive has significantly more heft than the older SD70 runs. The warm white LEDs are also great and have a good constant brightness on all the lighting features. Similar to other releases though, the model does not have a supercapacitor, and I think Athearn is really missing the mark by not including those from the factory, especially if the internals are now packed full of die-cast weight. Athearn delivered the locomotive with the number boards on DCC function 23 and the ground lights on function 24, just mildly annoying since function 6, a normal lighting feature function, is not used for anything, and the ground lights should come on with track power. The model does not also include the lighting features like the side step lights, even though many other Genesis products include this and other manufacturers are now also starting to produce this as well. All the wheels were found to be engaged, and while providing tractive force, they do also pick up power from the rails. The trucks are nicely detailed with good molded on detail and separately applied details on all 4 truck side frames. The McHenry plastic scale couplers were both found at the correct height. Even though the rear coupler basically had a broken knuckle, I don't see that working for much longer. The value of the model is pretty opinionated with an MSRP of $350, but you can shop around and find them closer to the mid-200s. Overall, I thought this model was not really a great value with a relatively high MSRP, and frankly, not a lot of upgrades from the older SD70ACe runs, and buyers should wait the options before purchasing this new run. Overall, the model is very nicely detailed, and Athearn has driven to providing us with a better SD70ACe model that it was not even relatively old and bringing it up to this Genesis 2.0 product line. However, I feel like they really missed the mark on several opportunities. Adding up all the points gives an 83 out of 100 or a low B for a letter grade. When comparing the model to recently reviewed models, the SD70ACe lands pretty low on the list, second from the bottom, only higher than the former release of the SD70ACe in the 1943 Memorial paint scheme. When I first got this locomotive, I actually had thought I'd received an older Genesis model and had to double check the product number to verify this is the Genesis 2 release. This locomotive I had pretty high hopes for in terms of getting into that Genesis 2.0 line, as one of my first locomotives into model railroading was actually the SD70ACe in the BNSF paint scheme almost 10 years ago, and when I first got it I thought it was the most amazingly detailed model, and then slowly as I got more and more involved into the hobby and starting to see some of the shortcomings of the model. I was also very excited for this announcement when Athearn had mentioned the re-release of a few of the Heritage units as well as the Montana Rail Link and a few numbers for BNSF. Then I had made plans to pre-order several of these. However, after getting this first unit in the WP, I'm glad I only made the initial pre-order, as I think one of these is going to fulfill my need for the entire Athearn Genesis run of the SD70ACe. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. I feel like this locomotive really started off strong, but then by the end of it, it was just kind of looking at the same thing, that it seemed more and more tiny issues that just kept popping up that I really wanted to fix. I think the portion that really burns me the most is that really there wasn't anything revolutionary or groundbreaking that I really wanted in this locomotive. It's just all the stuff that's easily done or the stuff that's already done or on other models, and that's just not there to be left. But let me know what you guys think. Like the majority of models in this hobby, the model does look good from about 3 feet away, but if you're getting any closer, then your eyes are going to start to see more and more of the issues. But let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.